The retired royal guard pulled his civilian coat tighter as he approached Windsor Castle, the familiar silhouette stirring memories of his 22 years standing guard. The crisp autumn air carried scents he knew by heart: rain-dampened stone, polished brass, the faintest hint of boot polish. 3 months into retirement, walking these grounds without his uniform still felt like wearing someone else's skin. Just another tourist today, he reminded himself, adjusting his cap as he joined the gathering crowd. His right leg ached where shrapnel had torn through muscle and bone during his final deployment. The doctors called it career-ending. Captain James Bennett called it merely inconvenient. Yet the medical discharge had forced him to surrender his post, his routine, his purpose. Through discreet inquiries with old comrades, Bennett had learned about his replacement, Private Thomas Harlow, 24 years old, impeccable service record. On paper, the perfect candidate. But paper didn't stand for 8 hours in driving rain. Paper didn't maintain composure when drunken tourists hurled insults. Paper didn't understand what it truly meant to wear the uniform. The standards aren't what they were. His former colleague, Captain Reynolds, had remarked during their monthly pub meeting. These new lads treat guard duty like any other posting. The comment had gnawed at Bennett ever since. Windsor wasn't just any posting. It was living history, an unbroken line of duty stretching back centuries. If standards were slipping, he couldn't stand idly by. Bennett checked his watch. Precisely 10 minutes before the changing of the guard ceremony. Perfect timing. His plan was simple: 3 days of anonymous observation, then a series of tests with help from his old friend Major Ashford. Nothing dangerous, just enough to see if Harlow truly deserved to stand where Bennett once stood. "Takes time to see what you're made of, Private Harlow," Bennett murmured as he blended into the crowd. The ceremony unfolded with clockwork precision. Bennett watched from behind his camera, scrutinizing every detail as Harlow marched into position. The private's scarlet tunic and bearskin cap were immaculate against Windsor's ancient stones. The crowd murmured appreciatively, cameras clicking rapidly. "Store. Look how still they stand," an American tourist whispered. "I couldn't do that for 5 minutes, let alone hours." Bennett's trained. I noticed what others missed. The faint shadow on Harlow's left glove where a stain had been recently cleaned. His rifle placement perfect, but perhaps a fraction slow. The angle of his bearskin cap precise to the degree Bennett himself had always demanded. Small imperfections invisible to tourists, but glaring to someone who'd worn that uniform for 22 years. Bad adequate, Bennett thought, though his assessment sounded more grudging than he'd intended. There was a difference between performing the motions and embodying the tradition. A young boy broke from his parents and ran toward Harlow, waving excitedly. Bennett tensed, watching for the private's reaction. Harlow's eyes remained fixed forward, not even a flicker of acknowledgement as the child's embarrassed father retrieved him. "They're not actually statues. You know," an elderly man commented nearby, "these lads have all served in combat. More than just pretty uniforms." Bennett glanced at the speaker, noting the regimental tie and subtle military bearing. Their eyes met briefly in silent recognition. "Served yourself?" the man asked quietly. 22 years, Bennett replied, equally soft. "Queen's Guard." The man nodded respectfully. "Thought as much. You've got the look, still evaluating your replacement, I see." His eyes twinkled with knowing amusement. Bennett's surprise must have shown despite his efforts to conceal it. "Did the same myself 30 years ago," the veteran explained. "Hard to let go, isn't it? Wondering if the next generation will uphold what you dedicated your life to." Bennett offered a non-committal grunt, uncomfortable with how easily his intentions had been read. He turned his attention back to Harlow, who remained motionless as teenagers posed for photos nearby. "He seems competent enough," Bennett admitted reluctantly. "But you're not convinced," the veteran finished for him. "The uniform deserves more than competence," Bennett replied. "It deserves devotion." As the crowd shifted, Bennett moved with it, observing Harlow from different angles. The private's posture remained impeccable, his gaze unwavering despite the swirling tourists. Grudgingly, Bennett acknowledged the superficial elements were all in place. But the true test of a guard came not when everything went according to plan, but when things went wrong. The next morning dawned, gray and drizzling. Perfect testing weather. Bennett spotted Major Ashford immediately among the thinner Tuesday crowd. Despite civilian clothes, Ashford carried unmistakable military bearing. His silver hair cropped in the same style he'd worn through 40 years of service. At 65, he still maintained the physique of a man who treated military standards as a lifelong commitment, not just professional requirement. They exchanged the briefest of nods before taking positions at opposite ends of the viewing area. Private Harlow stood at attention, water beading on his uniform like liquid glass. If the discomfort of wet wool and the weight of a sodden bearskin cap bothered him, it didn't show. "Let's see how you handle some pressure, lad," Bennett murmured as Ashford began their planned approach. "Impressive bit of kit you've got there," Ashford called out, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "Suppose it must get heavy after a while, eh? That rifle real or just for show?" Bennett watched intently, noting how Harlow's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, while his stance remained unchanged. "Do they let you fellows take bathroom breaks? Or do you just have to hold it?" Ashford continued, his tone jovial but increasingly intrusive. He stepped closer. "Must say I don't envy you in this weather. Like standing in a cold shower in fancy dress, I'd imagine." Nearby tourists exchanged uncomfortable glances. Bennett recognized the dynamic. How visitors often felt collective embarrassment when one of their number behaved poorly. "Klukimina, you know my tax pounds, pay your salary," Ashford pressed, now standing close enough that a palace attendant began approaching. "Seems like the least you could do is acknowledge a friendly hello, or perhaps a little song and dance." He chuckled at his own joke. Bennett watched Harlow's eyes closely. The true measure of a guard lay not in maintaining stillness, but in knowing precisely when to break it. In the private's gaze, he detected not irritation but calm assessment, a man measuring potential threat while remaining fully in control. The attendant arrived at Ashford's side. "Sir, I'll need you to step behind the rope line. Just having a friendly chat with our granite-faced friend here," Ashford protested good-naturedly. "Nevertheless, sir, those are the rules. The guards are on active duty." Ashford allowed himself to be guided back, but not before delivering his final test, reaching toward the tassels on Harlow's uniform. The reaction was immediate but measured. Harlow shifted his rifle into formal warning position, a movement so precise it seemed part of the ceremony rather than a response to provocation. "Step back, sir." 3 words delivered with such command that even a decorated major complied instinctively. The crowd fell silent, cameras lowering as they witnessed this rare break in the guard's stoicism. Attendants seized the moment to usher Ashford away, and the incident passed without escalation. Bennett felt unexpected approval. Harlow had followed protocol perfectly. No premature reaction, no excessive response, no loss of composure. When intervention became necessary, it was executed with textbook precision. "Well," Ashford asked later at a cafe several streets away, "he passed your little test." "With flying colors, I'd say," Ashford corrected. "The lad's got proper control. Didn't let me rattle him, but didn't let me cross the line either." Bennett nodded reluctantly. "One test doesn't make a guardsman." "No," Ashford agreed, eyeing his friend with amusement. "But you're already less certain of your judgment, aren't you?" Bennett didn't answer, but the slight frown creasing his brow was answer enough. Private Harlow had surprised him today. not with his failures, but with his competence. Tomorrow would require different tactics. Wednesday afternoon found Bennett following Harlow at a discreet distance as the young guardsman, now in civilian clothes, made his way through Windsor's streets. Bennett expected him to head for the local pub or his quarters, natural destinations after a demanding shift. Instead, Harlow boarded a bus, heading toward the outskirts of town. 20 minutes later, Bennett watched with growing curiosity as Harlow entered Oakwood Military Rehabilitation Center, a facility Bennett knew well from his own recovery. Making a quick decision, he followed, using his veteran status to gain entry without raising suspicion. The reception area was warm and institutional, decorated with regimental flags and royal visit photographs. The sound of laughter guided Bennett down a corridor. He paused in a doorway, staying partially hidden as he surveyed the scene. Private Harlow, still ramrod straight despite casual clothes, sat among wounded veterans, some in wheelchairs, others with prosthetics or the thousand-yard stare of invisible wounds. He appeared to be leading a workshop, his hands moving deftly as he demonstrated something. "That's it, exactly," Harlow was saying to a young man struggling with a prosthetic arm. "Small movements first, then build up complexity. Just like drill exercises, master the basics before attempting the flourish." Bennett edged closer, careful to remain unnoticed. The workshop involved woodworking, miniature carved figures taking shape under the veteran's hands. "When I first started guard duty," Harlow continued, "my shoulders would not up terribly after standing still for hours. Found these small carving movements perfect for rebuilding dexterity without strain." He smiled, transforming his serious face. "Plus, they give you something to focus on besides how much your feet hurt." Quiet laughter rippled through the group. The easy camaraderie surprised Bennett. This clearly wasn't Harlow's first visit. "Thomas has been coming every Wednesday for nearly 8 months now," a nurse said quietly beside Bennett. "One of our most dedicated volunteers. You're welcome to join the session." "I'm just observing," Bennett replied, unsure how to explain his presence. "Well, he's worth observing," the nurse said approvingly. "Started teaching drill techniques for physical therapy, but it's become much more. The men respect him because he listens first, treats them like soldiers, not patients. He requested Wednesdays specifically. Comes straight from guard duty without a break." Bennett felt his assessment of the young guardsman shift. This wasn't someone who viewed his uniform as just a job, but whose dedication extended far beyond duty hours. Thursday brought clear skies and larger crowds to Windsor Castle. The morning passed uneventfully until sudden commotion erupted near the rope barrier. A crowd gathered around a collapsed elderly man, his wife kneeling beside him in distress. "Someone call an ambulance," voices cried. Bennett instinctively moved toward the scene, then froze, watching as Harlow faced every guardsman's most difficult decision: when to break protocol. For 3 eternal seconds, Harlow remained at his post, eyes forward as regulations demanded. Then, with movements that somehow maintained dignity despite breaking formation, he stepped forward. "Stand aside, please." The crowd parted automatically at his commanding tone. Harlow knelt beside the fallen man, checking vitals with practiced efficiency. "Sir, can you hear me? He has a heart condition," the wife explained tremulously. "His medication." "I can't find it. Has anyone called emergency services?" Harlow asked, voice clear and controlled. "On their way," someone confirmed. Bennett watched as Harlow efficiently loosened the man's collar and positioned him properly. Not basic first aid, but the confident response of a combat medic. A palace security officer arrived with medical equipment, working alongside Harlow until paramedics took over. Only then did Harlow stand, brush down his uniform, and return to his post. The crowd parted respectfully, several nodding acknowledgment as he passed. Before resuming position, Harlow exchanged brief words with a senior guard. "Necessary intervention, sir. Full report will follow." With precise turns, Harlow returned to his stance as if nothing had happened. Bennett felt his final reservations crumbling. Harlow had made the perfect call, maintaining protocol until human need demanded otherwise, then acting with confidence before returning to duty without fanfare. His actions had honored, not diminished, the uniform. As emergency vehicles departed and normal activities resumed, Bennett made his decision. It was time to meet Private Thomas Harlow face to face. The Royal Oak Pub sat tucked away on a quiet side street, safely distant from tourist crowds. Bennett arrived early, securing a corner table with clear view of the entrance. At precisely 7 p.m., Harlow entered, civilian clothes still carrying military crispness. "Captain Bennett," he said, extending his hand. "I wondered when you'd introduce yourself." Bennett's eyebrows rose as they shook hands. "You know who I am? The man whose position I assumed, a decorated captain who's been observing me for 3 days." Harlow's tone held respect but no deference. "Your response to yesterday's emergency was well handled. Where did you learn those skills?" "2 tours in Afghanistan, sir. Combat medic with our forward unit before applying to the Queen's Guard." Harlow's eyes held Bennett's steadily. "Lost 3 good men because we couldn't reach them in time. Promised myself I'd never again stand by when I could act. And the rehabilitation center. That's not standard duty. My younger brother lost his left leg above the knee at Helmand Province. The center helped him regain not just mobility but purpose. It's a debt I can never fully repay, but I try." As they talked over drinks, Bennett studied Harlow with new eyes, not as a replacement to be tested, but as continuation of the same lineage. "Why the Queen's Guard?" Bennett asked. "With your experience, you could have pursued numerous military paths." "My grandfather guarded Buckingham Palace during the Blitz, refused to abandon his post even as bombs fell. My father served 16 years in the same position." Harlow's voice took on a quality Bennett recognized, someone speaking about something sacred. "When I wear that uniform, I'm not just representing crown or military. I'm honoring a family tradition spanning generations. The uniform means that much to you." "With respect, sir, the uniform is just cloth and brass. It's what it represents that matters. Discipline, dedication, willingness to stand fast when others cannot. As you well know, Captain, most days nothing happens. We stand, tourists take pictures, life continues. But we stand ready nonetheless, because that readiness itself has meaning." "I came to test you," Bennett admitted finally. "To assure myself my replacement was worthy of the post." "I know, sir. I would have done the same." Bennett's gaze sharpened. "You knew I was testing you since the first day. Your positioning, your focus on protocol details, your conversation with the elderly veteran who recognized you, all consistent with surveillance. And Major Ashford's performance, while convincing 2 civilians, contained phrases only someone military would select for provocation. Yet, you didn't confront me or report the harassment. Confrontation wasn't necessary. As for Major Ashford, his test remained within boundaries I could handle professionally. Escalating would have been overreaction." This measured response impressed Bennett more than any practiced maneuver. The judgment to know when action was warranted and when restraint served better. Such wisdom couldn't be taught, only earned through experience. "You let me continue my evaluation," Bennett realized, "knowing I was judging your worthiness." "I welcomed it," Harlow replied simply. "Your reputation precedes you, Captain. When I learned whose position I'd be filling, I studied your record extensively. If anyone had right to evaluate my performance, it was you." "And did I pass your evaluation, Private Harlow?" Bennett asked with unexpected lightness. Dedication to standards is commendable, sir. Your concern for the position's integrity, admirable. Harlow hesitated, then added, "But your assumption that younger generations can't match your commitment to tradition, that merits reconsideration." The direct criticism struck Bennett with truth's force. How easily he'd fallen into believing tradition belonged exclusively to those who'd upheld it longest, rather than to all who upheld it well. Finn, when we make the uniform about ourselves, our pride, our legacy, we miss its true purpose, Harlow continued. The bearskin cap and scarlet tunic existed before us and will continue after. We're not tradition's owners, only its temporary custodians. I came to test whether you deserved my position, Bennett admitted. I never considered that perhaps the position was never mine to bestow. It belongs to duty itself, Harlow agreed quietly. We simply take our turn standing in its place. In their pub corner, a deeper understanding took shape. Bennett saw in Harlow not replacement but continuation, different in person but identical in purpose. I owe you an apology, Private. I judged based on assumptions rather than evidence, the very behavior I've spent a career advising against. No apology needed, sir. Concern for standards requires no forgiveness. Harlow's steady gaze held Bennett's. But perhaps we can exchange something more valuable than apologies or judgment. And what might that be? Experience and perspective. Your 2 decades of knowledge, unwritten protocols, handling unusual situations, history behind traditions. These aren't in any training manual. In return, perhaps I could offer reassurance that what you helped build isn't ending with your departure, that the standards you upheld continue through those who follow. In that moment, Bennett recognized what had truly troubled him since retirement, not doubt about Harlow's capabilities, but fear his own service would be forgotten, that traditions he'd preserved would fade without his vigilance. "I believe," Bennett said slowly, "we have the basis for a fair exchange, Private Harlow." 3 weeks later, Bennett stood among tourists at Windsor Castle, watching the changing of the guard with new eyes. Private Harlow marched with the same precision Bennett had first observed, but now he saw the purpose behind the performance, the person within the uniform. Their conversations had continued over several evenings, not as superior and subordinate, but as guardians of the same tradition separated only by time. Bennett shared unwritten history, subtle signals between guards, techniques for maintaining concentration during 8-hour shifts, the significance behind ceremonial movements tourists mistook for mere pageantry. Harlow, in turn, introduced Bennett to other young guards. Combat engineers understanding palace security systems at technical levels Bennett never had. Linguists detecting security threats in a dozen languages. Veterans applying modern warfare lessons to ceremonial security. "Quite something, isn't it?" said a voice beside him. Bennett turned to find Major Ashford in civilian clothes but with unmistakable military bearing. The changing of the guard. "I've seen it a few thousand times," Bennett replied dryly. "Not the ceremony," Ashford corrected. "The changing of the guard in larger sense. Your acceptance of it." He studied Bennett's face. "You seem at peace with your replacement." Bennett watched Harlow assume position, stance perfect, gaze forward, the very image of disciplined vigilance. "He's not my replacement. He's my successor. There's a difference." Ashford nodded, understanding the distinction. Replacement suggests something lost. Succession implies something preserved and passed forward. Precisely. Bennett's hand moved unconsciously to his leg. "I mistook the uniform for the duty, as if hanging up one meant abandoning the other." The previous evening, Harlow had invited Bennett to consider a new role, not as anonymous observer or retired veteran, but as bridge between public and tradition. The military history department needed someone to explain ceremonial aspects' true purpose, the Guard's actual training and requirements. Who better than a captain with 22 years distinguished service? Harlow had asked. The idea had taken root immediately, a way to continue serving the tradition he loved while acknowledging changed circumstances, not standing guard physically, but protecting its meaning. "He's a good man. You're Harlow," Ashford commented, following Bennett's gaze. "Different from our generation in some ways, but the core, that hasn't changed." "The uniform changes slightly each era," Bennett agreed. "New materials, subtle design adjustments, but its purpose remains constant. Perhaps the same is true of those who wear it." As they turned to leave, Bennett cast one final glance at Private Harlow. The young guard maintained his forward gaze, the perfect image of ceremonial discipline. Yet Bennett now knew the depths behind that stance, the combat experience, volunteer work, family legacy of service, all invisible beneath the scarlet tunic, but essential to its true meaning. "Ready for your first tour group tomorrow?" Ashford asked as they walked away. Bennett nodded, feeling renewed purpose. "The tradition continues," he said simply, "just in a different uniform."